Hello and welcome to English with Justino. These are stories and discussions designed for you to learn English vocabulary, expressions, culture, and maybe even some grammar along the way. These are designed for those already speaking English at an intermediate or advanced level. The idea here is to listen, read, and learn from a native English speaker in a natural way, the way you first learned your native language, by hearing it. Okay, forward we go. Alice's Wonderland Adventures, Chapter 8, Lesson 2. Alice was in the beautiful garden, and the procession with the king and queen had just passed Alice by. "Alice," shouted the queen, "can you play croquet?" Everyone looked at Alice. "Yes, of course," shouted Alice. "Come on then," roared the queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. What did the queen ask Alice to do? The queen asked Alice if she could play croquet. Did Alice want to play? Yes, Alice wanted to play croquet, and so she followed the procession. "It's a very fine day," said a timid voice at her side. She was walking next to the White Rabbit, who was anxiously looking her in the face. "A very nice day," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" Who started talking to Alice? The White Rabbit started talking to Alice. What did Alice ask the White Rabbit? Alice asked the White Rabbit where the Duchess was. "Shh, shh," said the rabbit in a low, nervous tone. He looked over his shoulder as he spoke, and then raised himself up on a tiptoe, put his mouth close to her ear, and whispered, "She's under sentence of execution." What did the White Rabbit tell Alice? The White Rabbit told Alice, in a secret tone, that the Duchess was going to be executed. "What for?" said Alice. "Did you say, 'what a pity'?" the rabbit asked. "No, I didn't," said Alice. "I don't think it's a pity at all. I said, 'what for?'" What did Alice want to know? Alice wanted to know why the Duchess was sentenced to be executed. "She boxed the Queen's ears," the rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. "Oh, hush," the rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. "The Queen will hear you. You see, she came rather late, and the Queen said—" What did the Duchess do to the Queen? The Duchess boxed her ears, meaning she hit the Queen's ears with her fists. Did Alice think this was funny? Yes, Alice thought it was funny that the Duchess boxed the Queen's ears. "Get to your places," shouted the Queen in a voice of thunder, and the people began running about in all directions, banging into one another. They settled down in a minute or two, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a strange game of croquet in her whole life. Did the Queen want to start the croquet game? Yes, the Queen wanted to start the croquet game, and she shouted to everyone to take their places. What did everyone do? They all ran around in every direction and were crashing into one another. Did the game then begin? Yes, they started playing the game. The players all played at once, without waiting their turn, arguing and fighting the whole time. In a very short time, the Queen was in a furious passion and went stomping around, shouting, "Off with his head," and "Off with her head." What was everyone doing? They were all playing at once, and arguing and fighting. Did the Queen get angry? Yes, the Queen was very angry. She was yelling to execute everyone. Alice began to feel very uneasy, to be sure. She did not have a dispute with the Queen, but she knew that it might happen any minute. And then, she thought, what would happen to me? They like to behead people here. It's a wonder anyone is left alive. Was Alice feeling comfortable and having fun? No, Alice was not comfortable. She was uneasy. Why? Because the Queen was yelling to execute everyone, and Alice did not want to have a dispute with the Queen. Alice was looking around for some way to escape, and wondering whether or not she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her at first, but then she realized it was a smiling cat face, and she said to herself, It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I have someone to talk to. Who showed up out of thin air? The Cheshire Cat. How's it going? Said the cat, as soon as there was a mouth big enough for it to speak with. Alice waited until its eyes appeared, and then nodded. It's no use talking until its ears have appeared, or at least one of them. In another minute, the whole head appeared. Alice started explaining the strange situation with the game, feeling glad the cat was there to listen. What did the Cheshire Cat ask Alice? The cat asked Alice, "How's it going?" What did Alice do when the cat's whole head appeared? She started telling the cat about the game, glad someone was there to listen. They're not playing fair at all, Alice complained, and they all argue and fight so much that nobody can tell what is going on. And they don't seem to have any rules. At least if there are, nobody is following them. Was Alice complaining about the game? Yes. Alice was complaining they were not playing fair, and everyone was fighting. How do you like the Queen? Said the cat in a low voice. Not at all, said Alice. She's so... Just then, she noticed that the Queen was close behind her, listening, so she went on. Likely to win. That it's hardly worth finishing the game. The Queen smiled and passed on. Who are you talking to? Said the King, going up to Alice and looking at the cat's head with great curiosity. It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat, said Alice. Allow me to introduce. I don't like the look of it at all, said the King. However, it may kiss my hand if it likes. I'd rather not, the cat remarked. Don't then, said the King. And don't look at me like that. He got behind Alice as he spoke. It must be removed, said the King very decidedly. He called the Queen, who was passing at the moment. My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed. The Queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. Off with his head, she said, without even looking around. I'll fetch the executioner myself, said the King eagerly, and he hurried off. Did the King like the Cheshire Cat? No, the King did not like the Cheshire Cat, and he asked the Queen to have the cat removed. What did the Queen do? The Queen ordered that the cat be executed. Alice went back to the game, but by then it was a mass of confusion, and it appeared to be over, at least for the moment. She came back to the Cheshire Cat, and was surprised to find a large crowd gathered around it. There was a great dispute going on between the executioner, the King, and the Queen, who were all talking at once. All the rest were silent and looking very uncomfortable. The moment Alice appeared, she was asked by all three to settle the argument, and they all spoke at once, telling Alice their side at the same time. She found it very hard to understand what was going on. Alice could not think of anything else to say but, "It's up to the Duchess. You should ask her about it." "She's in prison," the Queen said to the executioner. "Go bring her here." And the executioner ran off to go get the Duchess. Meanwhile, the Cheshire Cat's head began fading away, and by the time the Duchess arrived, it had entirely disappeared. The King and the executioner ran wildly around looking for it, while the rest of the party went back to the game. The story summary. Alice was in a beautiful garden, and the Queen asked her to play croquet. It was a crazy game, as everyone played at once without taking turns, and they were all fighting and yelling at one another. The Cheshire Cat appeared out of thin air again, and Alice was glad to have someone to talk to. The King arrived and decided he did not like the cat and wanted it removed, so the Queen ordered it to be executed. The group all then began arguing and wanted Alice to mediate their problems, and Alice said it was up to the Duchess to decide. The Duchess arrived, and by then the Cheshire Cat had disappeared, and the King and the executioner were wildly looking for it.